Frannie. It was the long days, you know, long days that stretched into very short nights. I used to get up with Joe just after 4 a.m, dragging my weary bones out of bed to make him a cuppa before he went to see to the cows. It wasn't so bad in the summer months, but the winters were bitter. I'd have to crack ice off my slippers more than once. Of course, if I hadn't worn them out in the yard the night before, would have helped. I was always doing that. I'd go to bed thinking of my chores were done, and then I'd remember I'd left the washing out, so I'd get back out of bed and dash out into the yard in my slippers. That's what happened that night, the worst night of my life it turned out to be. I'd just settled into bed with Joe when I remembered I'd left the washing out. Leave it for the morning, Joe mumbled from somewhere under the covers. But I'm a tidy person, see. I couldn't leave the washing out. So out I goes in the dead of night, in the rain. And I could have left it out. My sister Ellen does that. She leaves her washing out for days. Says she's letting it rinse through again. I said to Joe once, what if someone stole her underwear? He said no one would want it, unless they were going camping because her knickers were the size of a 2-man tent. It was very eerie outside that night. The moon had cast a silvery light across the yard and the old wall beyond. Very pretty, but a bit, eerie. As a rule, I'm not afraid of the dark. I was brought up in a house with no electricity, only candles we had. Candles in jam jars. I could have done with a candle in that yard. I felt afraid, like someone was watching me, but I couldn't see a thing. I went down over the grass to the washing lane and began to gather it in as fast as I could. Pegs went flying everywhere. I wasn't going to bother about those. I was sure someone was there. But the dogs were quiet, so I thought I must be scaring myself, and I told myself off for it. But I skipped and ran the last 10 feet to the door. I shot in the kitchen and bolted the door behind me. Then I was afraid in my own kitchen, but I didn't know why. I'd never been afraid in my own kitchen before. It was my kitchen, where I'd spent many a happy hour or not, depending on whether Joe had tracked in mud for the umpteenth time. I threw the wet clothes onto the table and hightailed it upstairs. I kicked my slippers off and then jumped into bed and tried to burrow under Joe to get warm. He didn't complain when my icy feet touched his. He always complained about my feet. Like blocks of ice, he used to say. Blocks of flipping ice. I said, Joe, love, are you all right? He didn't answer me. I nudged his shoulder like you do. Not enough to wake him, but just so he'd grunt to let me know he was still alive. Only he didn't grunt. He didn't do anything, he just lay there. My heart was hammering so loud I couldn't tell if Joe's was still working or not. I didn't know what to do. I leaned over him to see if I could feel him breathing. I even got my old compact with the cracked mirror and held it to his mouth. Nothing. I sat on the bed and looked at him for what seemed ages, but was probably only minutes. I was waiting for my brain to catch up and tell me what to do. Funny how your brain stops working when you've had a shock. A fierce breeze whipped through the bedroom. It was always cold in the bedroom. Joe always liked the window wide open, summer and winter, and that night there was a force 9 whistling through the room. I shut the window for the first time in 40 years. Then I tucked the blankets up to his chin and kissed him on the nose just like I always did. He had a very large nose, did Joe. It took him years to grow into it. When I first knew him, it seemed to take over his face, but as he got older, the rest of his face caught up with it, and it suited him. He used to tease me, what a big nose means, don't you, Frannie, he'd say. What I used to say, all coy, like I hadn't heard the answer 100 times before. Big hankies, he'd say, and wink at me. Joe couldn't wink at me anymore. He couldn't track mud in anymore either. I missed that. I missed his nose pushing into my neck when he used to have a cuddle. I missed his big old hands on my waist, swassing me around the kitchen when a Glenn Miller tune came on the radio. I missed the way his lovely blue eyes crinkled at the corners when he grinned. He used to look at me with so much love, even when we were knee-deep in slurry or sheep dip. That's a test for any relationship, that is. If your man can still love you when you're splattered head to toe in slurry, then you have a good man. I missed him every day in lots and lots of ways. But most of all, I missed being loved. I had to sell the farm. It was too much for me, and I was broken-hearted all over again. We'd worked hard all those years, and I still woke at 4 a.m. for a long time. I often used to think I must get Joe's tea before I'd remember that Joe wasn't there to drink tea anymore. Then I'd have a little cry, turn over and try to get back to sleep. You must understand that that I didn't want to live anymore, not without Joe. Without anything that is familiar to me, I couldn't see the point. So on the day of the farm sale, when the last of the stock had gone, I sat in the yard and had a little chat with God. I hoped he was listening because we'd been strangers for a while. I told him I was ready to go. I told him I wanted to be with Joe, that I had done my stint here, and when he had a minute, would he collect me up? Well, he must have been listening, because 8 long months later I was taken poorly, very poorly, pneumonia they said. I was in the cottage hospital one night, just sleeping a bit, when I saw my Joe. I knew I wasn't dreaming, I really wasn't. He was stood there at the end of my bed. I stared at him and said, "Joe, is that you, Joe?" He smiled at me and I heard his voice inside my head. "Hello, my darling girl," he said. He always called me his darling girl, even when I was long past being anyone's idea of a girl. He was funny like that. "You come in with me," he said. I would have gone anywhere with my Joe, anywhere at all. He came over to my side of the bed and took my hand in his big warm farmer's hand, and I slipped out of that tired old body just like you'd slip out of an old overcoat. And I was with my special man, and that, my friend, is dying. No matter what you go through to get there, slipping off your old overcoat is so easy. There is nothing to be afraid of, because the person you love most in the world still loves you. They will come for you and they will see you safely home.